book review time again. This time we're doing Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power by Jon Meacham. There it is, looking good. He's one of our more handsome presidents. Yes, he is, and ginger to boot. Anyway, so I'm going to compare this Thomas Jefferson book kind of to another famous ginger's book, Hamilton, which, as you may have heard, is a rather popular book that led to a rather popular musical. Now that one was pretty detailed and minute and frank. I would say this Thomas Jefferson book is maybe a little nicer to his subject than the Hamilton author was to his. Now, as you know, that Hamilton and Jefferson sparred a lot, and I would say that the Hamilton book was maybe more honest about that sparring than this was Thomas Jefferson. Now, it's called The Art of Power, so I think that part of the art of power is that they gloss over some of his imperfections. Now, they do acknowledge them, but he usually supports it by saying, well, he was generally very nice, except for when he wasn't. But when he wasn't, it was because he was defending those he loved very much, his country or his beautiful daughters or what have you. Thomas Jefferson always had to be in control, aka get his way. So he was very kind and generous, one of the more upstanding, gregarious patriarchs you can ask for, who was very generous and kind to everybody, but just let him get his way and you'll be fine. If you cross him, it might not end up so nice. He was used to being the patriarch in the sense of being, in charge of other people's lives and stuff, not just slaves, but he was a statesman, and, he owned an estate, so he had slaves, but also lots of family members, and he was always in charge of, and then he was the governor of Virginia, and he was always comfortable with being in charge. He, interestingly though, even though he was an outspoken gentleman, he was also avoided confrontation, which is an interesting twist for a guy who had very, very strong opinions. One of the big differences between him and Hamilton was like a dog that just jumped right in and liked confrontation. So these two fought, even though one liked confrontation, the other didn't. Jefferson himself portrayed himself and Hamilton in Washington's cabinet as two cocks fighting for dominance. So that's what that was like, but they had very different techniques. Jefferson was known for being charming and handsome and kind and all that, but he wasn't like a big, mean, magnanimous guy. One of the things they say that they liked about him so much is that if he was in a room filled with people, he could engage any of them in conversation, but it would always be with the person right next to him. He wasn't a poser. He was genuinely engaged with the person he was talking to at all times. And he just had a lot of love, apparently. Maybe too much love. They do actually mention Sally Hemings in this book as a sort of fact that they slept together and things like that. So that's interesting. He did, as you know, he did have conflicts with Hamilton. Hamilton was officially the leader of the Federalists, and unofficially, and Jefferson was unofficially the leader of the Republicans. They got in fights and everything like that, and Hamilton wanted, more centralized power and executive power, whereas Jefferson philosophized before he got to the presidency. He was against it, but then when he became president, he used all those powers that were given to the executive by the previous presidents and Hamilton and things like that. So, but they say he was a philosopher, but also a pragmatist. Generally, his pragmatism won. He used, for example, the Louisiana Purchase was an example of a very big executive move that he did unilaterally. He initially wrote a letter saying, please, Congress, I'd like you to approve this, and then he backed out and said, don't tell anybody that I suggested that the Congress should approve it, let's just do it. But it really turned out, it pretty much fell in his lap. He was like, ooh, that Louisiana Purchase sounds like a good idea, but then by the time the representatives got to Paris, Napoleon was just like, here, take it, I can't deal. Because he had wars to contend with, apparently, and North America was far away. But he generally liked to, he made friends of his enemies. Now, his enemies hated him unless they knew him personally. His enemies would, say that when he became president, they all freaked out and everything like that. But anybody that actually got to meet him personally was like, nah, we have different views, but he's an all right guy. He's a good guy. Anyway, I recommend this book. Even though it's not as good as Hamilton, it's still pretty interesting. It does gloss over Hamilton's contributions in a way that the Hamilton book does not gloss over Jefferson's, which is interesting, but I guess that's the art of power, right? As we mentioned earlier. And even when one interesting thing about that is that when Hamilton was shot by Burr, who was also Jefferson's enemy at that point, Jefferson said nothing about Hamilton at all. But in his first inaugural speech in 1801, when he won against Aaron Burr, he said, "We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists." Does that sound familiar to you? Even though he was a Republican when he was shooting his mouth off, when he became president, he tried to serve all people, which is what presidents are supposed to do. So, read the book, enjoy. Thomas Jefferson, he's the man.